Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Skull.
I'm Zombie Cat.
And this is The Horror Den. Now, today we're going to be covering a movie called Grave Encounters. It was released in 2011 and it's directed by the Vicious Brothers. So, what'd you think?
I love this movie. I've seen this movie at least 3 or 4 times. It's a really fun, just horror movie. It's not very serious, very cheesy at times, but...
Yeah, I feel like it was released during the ghost movie craze, like Paranormal Activity and such, that we will be covering in the future. But it's like right in that kind of pocket in horror history.
When did Paranormal Activity release?
I'm pretty sure it was like 2010.
2009 or 2010, something like that.
It was like, small spoiler, the second movie, they stab at that, because I was saying how it's like a meta movie. They like jab at like, oh, it's so fake because we already had like Blair Witch Project and we had Paranormal Activity, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Blair Witch because it'll definitely be brought up here in a little bit.
Yeah.
So just a brief thing about the movie. We will be discussing spoilers in this movie. I mean, I know that this movie is 13 years old this year, but just in case you haven't seen it like me before doing this review, if you want it to be spoiler-free when you experience it for your first time, I would suggest pausing the video, go ahead and go watch the movie. You can find it on Amazon Prime for free, or Freevee if you have that. But I haven't seen it, and we're going to be spoiling a lot of it. So right from the get-go, it starts uniquely. I will say that for all the found footage documentary horrors that are out there. You know, we see this like executive sitting in an office and he's discussing with this team about this found footage that they found from a pilot season, like a first season of a paranormal show. And I definitely know that like in the movie, he specifies that this was a show that was released before that craze happened on TV. So it was like ahead of its time.
Like before Ghost Hunters, before what were some more?
Ghost Adventures, Paranormal State.
Yeah.
Then it goes right into the found footage itself.
It's also episode 6 he mentions, and he of course says this is 100% real. It was just sent to him, and this is just like 76 something like that. 76 minutes of just. He said the only things that were cut was just for filling. Like that was it. So
like time reasons.
Pretty much just chopped it up into a movie.
So right from the get-go, we see this group of characters, right? And they do a mock intro of like one of those old school paranormal shows, and I'm just getting flashbacks the entire time of Ghost Adventures. It sounds exactly like that same intro and like the Paranormal State intro where it's like, I'm Zach Bagans. And it's just, it's out there and it's really funny, and it's, they're definitely poking fun at these ghost shows.
I watched a lot of Ghost Hunters growing up with my dad, so that's a pretty nostalgic memory. Like, we were talking about how just nostalgic this almost feels, especially the beginning parts before things get too crazy. They're joking around, talking about, like, this place is as haunted as a sock drawer, but it's like them, like, talking out of character, essentially, but when they're trying to make things seem spooky, they're like, oh, is this real ectoplasm and stuff like that. It's like,
and also there's the whole section where they're doing the interviews with all these people, like the caretaker. But during this mock interviews, like not mock interviews, but just the interviews that they do with these other characters, like the caretaker and the gardener, they pull the gardener aside and he's like, I just started working here. And so the guy Lance, the head guy, you know, the I'm Zach Bagans guy, he pulls a $20 bill out and it's just, make something up. And then it cuts to the interview and he's like, I saw a ghost right over there. It was very scary.
Guys, we have 100% proof of paranormal phenomenon right outside the building.
Oh my God. Anytime that during the interviews they say anything, they're like, it's a residual haunting. Or, well, in this instance, it's an intelligent spirit. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
My dad, he loves this kind of stuff. Like, he was telling me a lot about, like, he loves ghost stuff, but they even mention it in the movie, like, a residual haunting is, like, an echo of the past, essentially, where they're in, like, a time loop doing unaliving situations.
Yeah.
And Of course, like an intelligent haunting is where it's like, it's almost playing with you. I guess you can say like something like Poltergeist or something like that.
He claims very early on that this is the kind of haunting that they're dealing with. And at this point, they're still hauntings, with the quotations and everything else.
And a lot of the people he interviews, they give him like little small stories. The caretaker who's been there for it seems like a good while. He knows everything about the building.
He actually says it. The caretaker has worked there for 8 years.
Okay, 8 years. And they're interviewing the guy, and he's like, I wouldn't say there's necessarily like ghosts here, but he says it's just weird, like just weird stuff, like a window that constantly opens, which becomes a big factor later on, even in the second movie. And there's just, he mentions just sounds, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Nothing crazy. There was a crew that was there for 2 weeks doing like just renovation, and they said tools were going missing at night while they were there, and they said the furthest it got, one guy got pushed off a ladder. Besides those, there's also a couple that are talking about they snuck out and they were like making out there at night, and they saw like an apparition of a patient almost who was like hovering in midair, and he was wearing a gown. He had a shaved head like one of the patients that would have been there. And that's really all they hear?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like during their interviews, that's really all that we get in terms of just like in a regular ghost show where it's like, they maybe have a crazy story, but those are the extent of what we hear. So it's kind of like just seems like an average
kind of just like
abandoned building.
Two kind of just spooky stuff happens, noises, and then there was one where they were like somebody got pushed, but that was
one important one. We didn't touch on the stories of like the history that they were told. One of which there's this pretty important room that comes up a couple times throughout the entire movie where they're in like this like bathing room, and there's a bunch of bathtubs, and there's this one specific one that's really grimy and dirty. It's the only one not tipped over, and the caretaker's like, a patient unalived themselves in this bathtub. And then they talk about the doctor who was lobotomizing people inside this hospital, and you learn more about the doctor later. But in stereotypical early 2000s ghost hunting show, they go into a lockdown that night where they get chained into the place and they go on their ghost hunt. And that's kind of like, it's pretty dead for a while, but then things start to pick up, and obviously as we get further into the movie.
When they start, it's like a typical ghost TV show. Like, they're just walking around. They have a fake psychic with them who's like reading things. He's a really funny kind of character.
He's like, oh, I feel something. This woman, she's in the bathtub.
They told him about this beforehand, and then as soon as they cut the cameras, he's like, "How did I do? Was that too much?" Kind of like that. It's really funny. He's a pretty funny character in the movie.
I feel like I can't continue with this without saying I know your feelings about it, but I personally believe in mediums to an extent, and I also believe in ghosts. But when we're talking about in the context of these shows, I'm not saying that all of it's fake. I'm not saying all of it's real, because how are we gonna know unless we're there?
They gotta make it entertaining.
Right. And
which they even, I didn't mean to cut you off. They even kind of touch on that where they're just like, this is before crazy stuff starts to happen. They're like, we need to get some just spooky shots, and I'm sure they stage like this ectoplasm on the wall, and they're like, oh, could this be real? Traces of ectoplasm. It's super goofy, so it's just
it looks like Slimer just came through this hallway, just like a little speckle of green slime right there.
Things take a dark turn real fast.
Oh yeah. Once the ball gets rolling, it don't stop. I mean, it starts off like all these other movies that we've referenced where it starts off slow and then it quickly amps up as time goes on. The first instance of like true knowledge of maybe horror is happening is when TC, the cameraman, is going around just getting these like ambiance shots of the hospital interior, and he gets a phone call from his wife and he has to speak to his daughter, so he puts the camera down, and in the middle of the hallway you see this wheelchair, and as he's talking he has his back turned, the wheelchair moves on its own.
Yeah, so we start small, of course, but I also loved, it's like just a little touch. He probably thought they were just like faking him out, or they either just missed it when they were walking. He's like, we completely missed that wheelchair being there. It's like, but it's pretty sad when you think about it, because this dude had a wife and kid. Aww. Then he goes into like a bathroom or either one of the patients' rooms, and they keep mentioning all throughout, this is the cliche ghost thing, like the temperature drops. They're talking about how it always gets cold. He walks into a bathroom and not even thinking about that, he's just like, damn, it's cold in here. And then as soon as he turns around, the door just slams on him, and it's like, at this point, y'all are screwed. At what point in the movie do you think they ain't getting out of this? I feel like there was probably a point where they could have walked out the door, but
yeah, well, like, when do I think, okay, are you asking me when do I think the trigger was, or are you asking me when did the characters like know that they're not getting out?
Just when do you think it first happened? Like
when this like crossing the line of like reality and whatever they stepped into.
I just want to mention too, I love these kind of movies where it's like you're almost in another dimension, because I always have this thought, it's like, what's happening in the real world right now?
Right.
It's like, because when the caretaker locks them in, he's like, I will be here at 6 a.m. sharp to pick you guys up. And they end up staying in this place in their time for like 72 hours, something like that. It was like, if not higher, I think it's
longer.
Might be even longer than that.
I think there's three options of when the line was crossed. It was either A, when the door closed and was locked and chained. That's a possibility. We don't know. The second option, I think, is when the activity started. And then I think the third option could be when the window opens, which we haven't gotten to that yet. But later on, as these things are happening, the camera tech, Matt, he goes around collecting these still cameras when everybody's starting to freak out. And he notices that the window that the caretaker was mentioning earlier on in their interview was open.
Those guys were renovating the place for 2 weeks, and all that happened was somebody got pushed. The caretaker, he's been there for 8 years. It's like, why wouldn't he be in this situation? So I was thinking maybe it's the fact they're provoking it almost. They're like...
That could be it, but also if you think about it, like the caretaker and these construction workers, they didn't lock the door.
I mean, I know, but...
I mean, that has to have some
like
kind
this,
of...
though...
I think that there is some kind of hidden meaning behind like the door literally being locked, like it was when it was open, and then now they are classified as patients because they can't get out. You know what I mean? Like there has to be some kind of...
I see what you're saying there, because that's kind of the... We'll get to it in a bit, but that's kind of the implication, is that these guys are patients now. They're part of this hospital. But... things I'd say really take a turn. Like we said, TC, he gets the door slammed on him, but they were excited about this. They were like, oh shoot, we actually got something. Like we actually got something. They're super stoked, but they're kind of freaked, but nothing like crazy. They're more happy about it than they are scared. And after this, they go to like the second floor. I think they heard some footsteps above them, remember? And they're like,
I think that happens a little bit later, but yeah, that does happen.
I think this is like the next paranormal thing, though. So I think they go to the second floor, and Sasha, she is standing, and she's like asking questions like, is there anybody here? Like, give us a sign, essentially. And then the second thing that happens is her hair gets pulled, like it gets lifted up, like they say, like her hair got manipulated, and it freaks her the hell out. Like she's gone. So like she bolts off, and this is kind of the point where the cast is starting to get like, I don't think I like this anymore.
Yeah,
like a huge change in personality, I guess. Lance is the only one who's still like, this is amazing. We're gonna be freaking millionaires. Like. Houston, the goofy psychic, he's wanting to go downstairs with Sasha and
sit in the lobby.
Yeah, he wants to. They joke about him the whole movie. He's just like sitting around, sitting in the lobby, stuff like that. But they go back up there, and Lance, he starts provoking the spirits once again. This is what I was talking about. He starts like taunting them. He's like, mess with my hair, knock on something, like do something. He's like getting kind of pissy almost, like he's like mad that it won't do it again. And then he takes the, what's the name of the camera, like the spectral photography
the spirit photography camera.
Yeah, he starts taking pictures. He's like, let me at least get some good pictures to throw into the show. And he takes a picture of a hallway, and you just see like tons of orbs just floating in the hall. It's super creepy, because I was mentioning, like, that's the equivalent of like people standing there, multiple patients just standing there. That's so scary.
And in every shot, you either see like an apparition or like a hand on a window.
I think it goes from the orbs to the apparition to the hand being on the window.
Yeah.
So at that point, that's when I think they're like completely screwed.
Yeah,
like,
but they don't know it yet.
Yeah.
They don't know it. They basically all mutually decide that we're going to pack our shit up and we're going to leave. And so Lance, the head guy, you know, the I'm Zach Bagans guy, he sends Matt, their tech, to go collect the still cams that they installed at the very beginning of their investigation. And that is when Matt discovers that the window that the caretaker was talking about is now open, which is a window that we referenced earlier. And he goes and he closes it, and he hears something like in the next room, and he goes to investigate, and then you hear something, and he never comes back.
They keep mentioning this window. It gets brought up more in the second movie again. But it opens, and I've just remembered there's like, you might be right on this with the window, because did you notice like the glitch in the camera? Like, that's the first time I think there was like a camera glitch, is when that window opened. So maybe that was the time warp essentially, because remember, we were talking later in the movie, you see the clock and it's like just rapidly going up and down, like bouncing and stuff. Like that's a really kind of creepy detail.
So meanwhile, back downstairs, the people are gathering their stuff, and they're like, where's Matt? So they decide to go look for him. They go upstairs, they find this pile of all of his equipment just kind of thrown out on the floor, which they say is weird.
Yeah, TC, he gets pushed down the stairs and he hurt his leg.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird, because that doesn't really come back up.
No,
at any point.
not at all.
He hurt his leg, and then that's really the end of it. It's kind of just a nitpick, but
at this point, people are starting to freak out. So they go and all gather downstairs, and they're all talking about what they should do. And that's when the characters realize that it's past 6 a.m. The caretaker is not there to let them out.
I already said this, but it just plays so well into like what's going on the outside. Like, how much time has passed? Do you think the caretaker showed up and they were gone? Or...
Oh, I'm sure he did. I'm sure he came and he opened the door and they were just gone.
Because I think it's almost like they're in another dimension. Like, this hospital is a dimension almost, like, and they're in like this time warp. TC's the one, he's like, I want to get out of here. I'm ready to go home, like right now. Something's off. So they take... What is it they push, like a bed?
He takes a hospital bed.
Yeah, hospital bed.
Does like in medieval times, trying to break down the gate. Like, heave ho! Gonna deal.
Of course, Lance is like, Kenny's gonna be here any minute and you're about to damage property.
It's gonna come out of your paycheck.
Yeah, and he's like, do I look like I care about my paycheck? And Lance is like, no, it don't. And they knock the door down and they realize... it just leads to another hallway. The entrance to this building, it had a cheesy, like, death awaits written in, like, neon green. And they were like, oh, that's so goofy at the beginning of the movie, like, making fun of it, essentially. But now they're in this hallway, and they're looking at it from the other side, and it has that same... So that is the front door to the asylum.
But it just really leads to more asylum. And then after that, when they try to justify it, they're still trying to rationalize what's happening to them. And so they're like, well, maybe this was the wrong door.
Even though it literally has the same
Yes.
spray paint and everything.
So TC mentions to the group that when he was doing his like shots around the outside of the building, doing a time lapse, there was a fire escape. So they should try to get up to a roof access, which he saw earlier on when the door was slammed on him. Basically, he saw the access to the roof. And so they go up there and they round the corner. You see the sign that says rooftop access with an arrow pointed upward. And they turn the corner and there's just a stone wall. No door, stone wall.
A solid wall. And this is when I'd say they start to just completely snap. Like they realize they're stuck. There's no getting out of this. But
well, what would you do at that point? At that point,
Yeah.
I'm cutting my losses, dude. But also, something I wanted to touch on, in our last video, we kind of had a small discussion about abandoned buildings. This, I would have left a long time ago or tried to bust down that door a long time ago. I don't remember where I wrote it down in my notes, but there was, whenever Matt was going to get the cams, I wrote down, and I quote, "There's no way I'd go get them cams by myself." No way. Absolutely not.
And it's kind of funny, too. It's like the ghosts are almost teasing them in a way that the only way out is the window, which is like 80 feet high.
But then while they're like making their way back down and trying to find an exit, they start hearing Matt screaming. Mm-hmm. And they try to go look for him, and they still can't find him. They run to a storage closet, and they go to sleep there after being chased by some kind of force that they can just feel. And they lock themselves in there, and they all go to sleep because they haven't slept. And they wake up, and Sasha has "hello" scratched into her back, like bleeding, like across the entirety of her back. Like, it's not a small little hello, it's a big one. Eventually, they have to leave the storage closet if they want to find a way to get out. But while they're going around, they got this creepy feeling going on. And then all of a sudden, they see a patient run into the other room, and the thing I wrote down in my notes was that this patient was running across the hallway like the old lady in It Chapter 2.
Yep, I've always said that too. Yep.
But they follow her around the corner, and they see her on video. Like, this is real. This is a real person standing there in the corner. And that was a nod to Blair Witch. Like, absolutely. And then, this apparition turns around, and then the face distorts into that weird, like, demonic thing going on, and then they just run.
The CG is a little aged. I'll mention that. It's slightly aged, but this movie came out in like 2011.
Yeah,
Probably didn't have a huge budget either.
Yeah,
probably not. 13 years ago.
Footage. But so I mean, for its time, pretty good jump scare.
During this whole patient escapade is when Houston gets separated from TC and the rest of the group, and Lance and them. So Houston gets separated, and you see him on the still cams like roaming through. And then in the hallway where this couple saw that apparition,
he's literally like patting down the wall, because that's literally the only way he can navigate, because it's literally pitch black for him. Like he just got ditched by everybody else, but he goes down the hall and he hears like a growl almost, and he takes his backpack off and is almost using it like a shield. And then down the hall, you see this from one of the still cams that Matt sets up at the beginning of the movie, and down the hall he gets lifted into the air. He's getting choked, and it's pretty cool effect of him. That is a cool effect of him getting lifted up. Like, that was really well done. But then it's followed by probably, like, the funniest part in the movie. He just gets, like, bounced all the way across the hall and dies.
So, like, he gets let down from being choked, and he's like, and then he stands up and starts trying to run back down the hallway, and then there's just this giant flash of light, like...
just the light.
And he gets shot, like, out of a cannon almost, down the hallway.
It looks really goofy, too.
Which, in my notes, I said, underlined... Houston's death is my favorite part so far.
It is. It's so funny. It's almost like, it's bad, but it's like, it's so funny that Just how it's done, it's really funny.
And then after Houston's death, it kind of cuts forward to when they slept again after this scary experience. And the rest of, like, TC, Lance, and Sasha wake up, and they have patient bracelets on their wrists that say their name and all their information that this place wouldn't know. But anyway, so they leave this storage closet that they found their way back into, and they're roaming around. And something I thought was really funny was like kind of another kind of like, I don't know if it was an intentional nod, but it was a nod. They're going through, and Sasha's standing in front of this door that has a window in it, and this arm bursts through and tries to grab her like at the end of Nightmare on Elm Street. That's what I thought of, and I was like, oh, she's gonna get pulled through that window, but she didn't. And then they run, and then they find Matt.
We found him. But he looks like he has been there for years. Like years. He's wearing a completely different outfit. He's in a hospital gown and tidy whities, and he just shriveled up, just terrified.
Batshit crazy.
Yeah, he's saying that he suffers from like childhood like trauma or something like that.
Yeah, he's talking to the rest of the group like a doctor giving a diagnosis.
He's telling them all of his symptoms and stuff, and saying that they'll let you out once you get better.
Then they lead Matt to like a safe space where they can all rest and like Matt sleep and all this other stuff. And then like there's this weird camera glitch, and all of a sudden there's arms coming out of the ceiling and the walls trying to grab him.
It's great because that's a really good effect.
Yeah, that was like the scariest shot in the whole movie. They go, like while they're running, they find their way back into that bathing chamber, and this time the bathtub's full of blood, and Matt's standing over it staring, and TC goes over to try to grab him, and then the whole time we were watching, I was like, he's gonna fall in that bathtub, he's gonna fall into it. And then all of a sudden, sure enough, a lady patient that unalived herself in the bathtub bursts through the blood, grabs TC and pulls him in, and they all of a sudden they drop cameras, they tip over the freaking tub. TC's gone. Just gone.
That's a fun scene. I like how the blood splashes on the camera. That's a lot of fun. Sasha and Matt, they're just like manically laughing, and Lance is like the only one who still kind of has somewhat sanity, I guess.
Guys.
But after that really cool scene, they find an elevator in a hallway. That's the first time I think we even saw the elevator.
Yeah, and they're talking about going down to the basement.
Yeah, that's their goal. That's what it is. They're like, let's get down to the basement because maybe this will lead to another building, because they're talking about these tunnels that basically lead to like other buildings essentially, which at this point Lance finds like the bottom of a bed rail. He kind of breaks it off and uses it to kind of like pry the elevator open, but he notices a severed tongue in the corner of the room, and then drops of blood start trickling on the floor, and he looks up, and of course we get to see another ghost, and that's a fun ghost too.
Yeah,
it's really cool. I like that scene. That one CG isn't that bad. I like that one.
I'm gonna be perfectly honest. At this moment, I thought it was the end of the movie.
Yeah,
with everything that transpires.
But I bet you've forgotten about Friedkin though.
Oh yeah,
because he's like, it's like it was gonna come back to him somehow, and it does. But it starts a really good chase sequence with this tongueless ghost, and they're trying to pry this elevator door open. I don't remember why. And he runs back towards the ghost. He was just going to fend him off, I guess.
He was going to fight a ghost with a lead pipe. What else can we say?
He drops the pipe, though. That was like a really just nitpicky moment. We're like, why did you drop the weapon?
But he's basically telling Sasha to take Matt and go down this emergency ladder in the elevator shaft, and I'm going to fight this ghost, man.
And then Lance gets the door kind of like pushed back, and then he gets Sasha to come help, and she's pushing the door, and then Matt picks up one of the cameras. Once again, this dude is like gone. He's gone. He's insane at this point, because who knows how much time has progressed just for him, because I think it's different. He grabs a camera, and they got the elevator door open, by the way, and he's looking down. It's a pretty big drop. I'd say. Like, I don't know exactly how tall it
20 or
was.
30 feet, probably.
Yeah, and he just kind of unalives himself. It's a pretty good shot. Like, he just does a Michael Jackson like lean, just like it's pretty spooky. Like,
Yeah,
it looks
yeah.
creepy. Like, it's funny when I say it that way, but like he literally just like leans forward. It's like, ooh.
And I mean, the whole time that you see him do this, just tip, and the whole time you hear fighting noises coming from the other room where you can't see. And then it goes to a really great shot, I might add, of him falling down the elevator shaft, and you see it through like the handheld.
It gives you that rising feeling in your stomach.
Then they run away from the ghost. They go down the ladder down to the bottom. They see the dead corpse, and they head off into the tunnels. And at this point, Sasha's lost it and is kind of worse for wear because the ghosts have been like really messing with her. And she just collapses on the ground and starts throwing up blood. And, they keep carrying on until they can't anymore. And then they're just sitting on the wall, like asleep.
Yeah, they said they were walking for like hours.
Yeah.
Like hours and hours.
And then, like, this mysterious fog just comes in, overtakes the shot. And then when it clears, Lance is all alone.
That I found really strange. I'm like, I wonder what that fog was supposed to be. Like, just, I mean, I'm assuming, of course, just some kind of entity or demonic spirit or something, but it's like, it's weird that it just grabbed her. It doesn't take Lance, but
It's because it wasn't done with Lance.
Right, yeah.
It was done with her, though.
that could be a good point. Maybe it didn't torture him enough as everyone
'cause
else.
he still kind of held on to that last little bit
Yeah.
of sanity. And
Okay.
It's kind of like everybody died or disappeared when they finally reached their breaking point.
right, yeah.
Or they're going to get treatment.
There's this really great shot where where Lance is officially starting to lose it, and they've done EVPs throughout this whole movie. Nothing.
Ooh, yeah. I know.
And he's sitting there in this tunnel, and it's just a dark shot, and it's like looking all wet and grimy. And he pulls out the EVP recorder, and he asks it like, who are you? Like, where are you? And all this other stuff. And then he plays it back, and you just hear like hundreds of laughing, maniacal
There's
voices.
people screaming for help. There's people crying. There's like you hear so many different little things. That's when I think he finally broke. It was right there. He starts sobbing. He kind of snaps at this point. Actually, becomes a little bit feral, which is something that gets brought up again in the second movie. To quit bringing up the second movie.
Yeah, we're not there yet. Zombie cat, we're not there yet.
But he sees a rat in the hallway. At this point, I mean, you'd be starving too. It was like 3 or 4 days. He takes his lead pipe from earlier and just smacks the rat and just starts digging in.
He doesn't just hit the rat. He flattens the rat. Like, gong flat.
And
eats it like a filet mignon.
he does. He tears into that thing. It kind of cuts probably who knows how long.
Well, he even states like he passed out. Like he just went to sleep. Like he doesn't know how much time has passed.
At this point, Lance is kind of like maniacally laughing, and he sees a door, and he's like, it's a door. He's so excited about it, and it's literally like the creepiest looking door you could imagine. We're just like, oh, that's not a good idea. But he goes in, and he's kind of just walking through. What does he pick up? He picks up something.
Oh, like the lobotomy tool?
That's what it was, because y'all were both like, is he about to do it himself?
Yeah, I swore he was going to lobotomize himself, because there was like, you're in a lab, you see all the stuff for lobotomies, and he sees the lobotomy needle that they stick up through the nose, and he's just like, I'm just like, oh boy.
He's seeing like all these pictures of, when did the guy at the beginning of the movie say that all this was happening? Like,
I think it was like in the 40s.
30s and 40s.
30s and 40s. Like, so yeah. It was like pictures, like black and white pictures from when this Dr. Friedkin was doing all this stuff, and he turns around, he looks down, and he sees, this explains the whole movie right here. He sees like a sigil, pentagram styled thing, and a skull, and then he looks up and sees crosses, and there's like some book, and it's almost like a Necronomicon vibe. This doctor, whatever, I imagine he was doing some kind of satanic experiments on these patients, and then doing all the lobotomies and stuff, and that caused all these spirits to be trapped in here from like this satanic ritual kind of deal going on. Who knows? That's kind of a fun thing, just to like, it lets your mind wander a little bit, like, what was he doing with all that stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm. And like when he sees all this, you know, he flips through the book and Lance turns around and you see there's this apparitions of multiple ghost doctors and there's this patient on the table.
You see Friedkin, the last jump scare is Friedkin, he runs up to Lance, like, it goes black and then I think he looks back up at him and Friedkin's standing in front of him because they were doing the lobotomy on the dude, and it's a fun little jump scare. Once again, the CG's a little goofy, but it's fine.
But then it cuts and we see Lance not okay.
Bleeding from the eyes.
Bleeding from the eyes. Definitely looks like lobotomy had happened. And he's just like, the doctor says I'm all better now and that I can go home. And then he finished it off with a great line. And he's just, and this is Lance from Grave Encounters. You know, like he's been signing off on the TV show. Mm-hmm. And then credits roll.
Yeah, so it's a fun movie. It's definitely watch it. Even if you've watched this and you had it spoiled for yourself, watch it, because like we said, we missed a few things. We already know that, but it's a typical ghost movie. The way I see this movie is like just a fun popcorn Halloween flick. If it's October, you don't have anything better to watch. It's like, I'd flip it on. It's like just a good ghost movie. That's not every movie has to be like Hereditary. It's like, it's sometimes fun just to watch jump scares and spooky atmosphere and stuff like that.
I definitely think that this movie is a product of its time.
Yeah, definitely. It's in that phase of when so many ghosts, so many jump scares, paranormal, exorcism movies. That was literally the craze.
I think it's time for us to get to the ratings. So for everybody who's actually watched our videos so far, we've actually decided to revamp our rating system to kind of give a more fairness across the board, because we discussed some movies that we will cover in the distant future that we didn't want to get an easy win. So we came up with this strategy. We've separated it into 6 different categories, and we'll go through each of them now. So the first category is we're giving it a story score about the overall plot as a whole. What did you think, Zombie Cat?
For the story, it's pretty cliche, to be honest. I mean, it's the whole, like I said, I love this kind of stuff. You know, I talked about, I love the like time warp and dimensional kind of thing. It's like, are they gonna get out? How will they get out? That kind of deal. So for me, story, I'd say like 6. 6 is fine.
Okay. Funny enough, I also gave the story a 6. If 5 is our average point, like it's an average horror movie
6
plot,
is just above average.
Yeah,
it's not bad, but not great.
I really appreciated how it was creative in the way of like kind of almost like a spoofing these movies. I've never seen another horror movie like that where they're spoofing paranormal investigators. I've seen it in shows like Supernatural, but this was a whole horror movie where it's like, what if, you know, a ghost adventuring team actually stumbled upon a real haunting? But also this is like Blair Witch, but in even a more recent time. That's really what it is.
A little over a decade.
The next category we have is characters, where we will be discussing our personal opinions 1 through 10 about the speaking characters and the named characters as a whole that we spend most of our time with. What'd you think?
For me, honestly, I love the characters in this movie. Like, I don't want to give it too high of a rating, though, because it's nothing like crazy good. They're just fun characters, like when they start going crazy. I'd say I'd rank it a little higher than story and do 7, because there's just so many like funny moments, especially with like the fake psychic and stuff like that. They're like picking on him the whole time. TC's a really funny character. Lance is like that perfect kind of like douchey ghost guy attitude like you were mentioning. And Sasha, whoever that actress is, I don't know, but she did a great job. Like, when she's like mentally snapping, I'm like, she's doing really good. Like, you almost like you just see it. She does so good. Like, I'd say the best actress in the movie is her.
I also gave the characters a 7, which gives us a solid 7. I felt that they were above, stupid, but
they're a little dumb at certain moments. Every horror movie.
But I mean, I felt like their characters had a little bit of substance. Like they had a personality.
That's what I was saying. Like we were mentioning with TC having a wife and daughter, just like something like that sprinkled in. That's like that added more kind of like depth to just the character. Just a small little phone call with his kid, and it's like he's never gonna see his kid again.
TC was my personal favorite. I thought he was we'll get to that in another section. But anyway, so you gave it a 7 with characters. I gave it a 7 for characters, which leads us to an average of 7. So that is added to our score. Our next is the antagonist. So obviously this is a little bit of a vague question because who is the antagonist? It's more of a force. It's the paranormal force of the movie.
Almost the hospital itself is the enemy, because whatever Friedkin did turned this place into like this satanic like realm of spirits almost. Antagonist for me though, just since it's not that prominent, like there's no one antagonist necessarily, it's gonna probably be pretty low for me. I'd say like a 4, just because there's no real antagonist. It's just kind of random ghosts just messing with them.
See, I gave the antagonist force a 5 because I felt like we had seen movies where the same antagonist could have... If you would have told me that this same ghost was in all these other ghost movies, I'd believe you. So that's why I gave it a 5. It's perfectly average. And yeah, I mean, we could sit here and debate that we could do about the Doctor, but he's literally mentioned a couple times in the movies and then only appears at the end. Yeah. I think that the Force as a whole is the antagonist. Right. So I'm giving it a solid 5. It's average. So I gave it a 5. You gave it a 4, which gives us an average of 4.5. And so we're going to add that to our total. Our next category is humor. How funny do we think this movie is?
This movie gets a solid 8 from me. It is really funny. There is so many kind of like... It adds to like... I was saying it's just a popcorn Halloween movie when it's just like... It still manages to be pretty scary. Don't get me wrong. Like the humor does not take away... It like feels in place. Like what they're joking about and stuff. It's like that... manic, like they're just yelling at each other, but it's just like funny. And then some of the deaths, like we were mentioning, like Houston's like getting flown across the hallway is pretty funny, and just a lot of the dialogue is super funny. Like when they're screaming at each other and making fun of each other, it's a good time. So
well, I'm glad to hear that we also have similar opinions on the humor, because I also gave the humor an 8. I felt like even when this movie was trying to be serious, it was just so funny. I think I laughed from beginning to end. I'm not even exaggerating. And I was cutting up the whole time. So I don't know if that's just because we came of age when this movie was coming around, so the humor is very similar, or at least the horror aspect is very similar to us. So even when it's not trying to be funny, it's funny.
And like I said, once again, for me, that's not a bad thing at all in this movie. Sometimes it's to where it's like the humor is what makes the bad movie kind of good, like with some of the cheesy slashers. With this, I think it adds to the characters, except for like some of the goofy CG, which is kind of funny, but it's mostly the characters yelling at each other sometimes. It's so freaking funny.
Right. Okay, so our second to last category is scariness. How scary do we think the movie is? And yes, we can take into account the time it was made.
For me personally, I've said that I've watched this movie maybe 3 or 4 times. The first time I watched it, of course, was the best time. And it's not necessarily like the same kind of scary that you're going to be staying up all night. It's more of just fun jump scares. So I'd say like a 4 in scariness. Like that, once again, isn't in a bad way. It's just... It's not necessarily like scary. It's just like fun. What you're watching is like supposed to be scary, but you're just kind of like, spooky ghosts. But
I gave this movie a 2 in terms of scariness. Now, I'm not sure that I don't mean it in a bad way, because if you're a horror fan and you're going to watch this to be scared, you are going to be disappointed. Like I said, I laughed the entire time. So if you're trying to find a movie that is actually going to scare you and you're in it for the scares, don't do it. Now, if you're with a buddy or a significant other or anyone that's like, I want to watch a horror movie, but I don't want to be too scared, this is a great one to put on because it's creepy, but it's not scary to me. So you gave it a 4, I gave it a 2. That gives us an average of 3 in the scariness. And now our last category of our review is experience. What is our overall opinion of the movie on a scale of 1 to 10? Like, how likely are we to recommend this?
Oh, for me, it's like an easy 7. I would definitely recommend this movie to people. It's like you were saying, it's just fun. I don't know what it is. It's just like a fun movie to watch. A lot of the humor is good. A lot of just fun jump scares. It's nothing that's gonna like really get you, to be honest. There's maybe 1 or 2 times that your first time watching it might be like, oh, that caught me off guard. But yeah, for me, it's like a solid 7. I like this movie a lot.
Okay. For me, this was my first time watching it. I gave it a 4 for experience. It's not a bad movie. I would definitely watch it again. However, just my overall opinion is that in terms of a horror movie, I think that it is a less than average, experience walking in. Again, this is my first time, and I'm going to be critical because I know the movies that are waiting in the wings to be reviewed.
Wait until you watch the second one.
Oh yeah, you did give me a warning that you think that the second one is worse. So who
worse.
knows? Maybe I will eat those words. Help me out here, you two. All right. So for experience, you gave it a 7. Mm-hmm. I gave it a 4. That gives us an average of 5.5. We averaged 6 in story, 7 in characters, 4.5 in antagonist, 8 in humor, 3 in scariness, and 5.5 in experience. So I definitely think that we can mutually agree that this is a movie worth watching.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you watch it for free, no harm, no
Right. And also I think that the score reflects that. It definitely could have done better in some categories like scariness to improve that score, but we're just giving our honest opinions at this very moment. We may eat our words when we watch the second one. But our goal here is to find the most perfect horror movie we can that finds a 10 in every one of these categories. Mm-hmm. Is that possible? We're not sure, but we're going to keep looking till we find it. So, Zombie Cat, you had an idea for a game to play at the end of our video, so why don't you go ahead and take over?
We're going to play a guessing game. We are going to guess what this movie got scored on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and audience. I'm going to let you go first. It goes by percentage. It's just 0 to 100.
Okay, are we starting with critics or are we starting with audience?
Go critics and audience. That's how most
All right, so my guess for the critics and audience score, I'm going to say critics gave it a 34%.
Yeah.
And I think the audiences gave it a 62.
That's pretty good. Let me see. I think for critic, what did you say? You said 34?
Yeah, I said 34.
For its time, because I'm assuming that's when it was ranked, I'm going to go off of time. I'd say closer to like a 45. Because maybe for its time, they would have gotten a little bit better. Because this was kind of at the peak of what we were saying, like all the movies like this started coming out. And for an audience, I'd say like a solid 60. I feel like audiences would have gave it a 60. I'd say. I think that's fair because once again, this is kind of like when all this really started to become popular. So for me, it's a 45% from critics and a 60 from audience.
So now that we got our scores for our guesses, I'm going to hand it over to our editor, D-Mac, who has the scores on his phone right now.
All right, so I'm actually a little bit surprised. The tomato meter, or the critic score, is a 65%.
Woo, that's good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the audience score is a 49%.
Wow. That's really surprising.
It's like opposite of what you guys, and myself included, would have thought.
Because typically a movie like this, you'd imagine the audience is a little more...
Yeah. Huh. Usually with any horror movie, as a matter of fact, usually the audience score is a little higher than the critic score. So it's kind of shocking to hear that, which, I mean, I don't think I agree that audience score should be that low. But, I mean, you know, maybe other people share the sentiment. Maybe the humor for other people takes out the quality. I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, the critic score, I'm surprised. They kind of more agreed with us in this instance.
Which, like I said, it might just be a product of its time, like we were talking about, to where this was coming to like be a popular genre. Maybe this was pretty early on in that kind of stage of horror. So,
well, I'm genuinely surprised. So, if you like the game we just played, just let us know down in the comments down below, and we'll keep doing it, and we'll do it for all the other movies leading forward. And, you know, since we revamped our scoring, we will eventually update our score for 1 Hour Photo, but for now, this is going to be the start of this process. We do eventually plan to go back to that movie in the distant future as kind of like a rehash. But that's all we got for now, and the next...
So, wait! I see something. What's that? Do you see this? We have Patreon. Who are these names? Oh my gosh.
So, for anybody who doesn't know yet, we started our own Patreon, and we have different tiers, and all the funds that we achieve through this Patreon, we will be using to upgrade our set, such as getting more microphones, getting a better phone stand, you know, getting better equipment for our editor, and also more, you know, it may be easier to use software in the distant future. So if you wanted to help out, just go over to our Instagram, or, you know, maybe our great editor can put in a link right here down in the description. So other than that, these are the names of the people that have so far subscribed to the Patreon. So big thank you. Big thank you to these people. And hopefully, you know, your support is not in vain.
It's only $5 a month. That's as low as it goes. You can, of course, do higher if you like, but all funds are going to go directly back into the channel. So, yeah, we're pretty excited to have our own Patreon now, so we at least have some sort of income, I suppose.
Yeah. And always, with every YouTube video you see, if you like what you see here, please hit the subscribe button. The more people that subscribe to the channel, the more close we get to meeting our goals. And also, like and comment on this video. It helps with the algorithm to get our message out there to the public. So if you like what we do here, please show us your support. We greatly appreciate it. And like always here at the Horror Den, just remember, stay spooky out there.